In this video, you'll see how I made this table from 2 slabs of wood. If you're new to the channel, this is Larry DeBose at DeBose of the Woods Woodworking, where I do all kinds of custom woodworking. Unlike some of my other projects, this one started out with a long negotiation phase that went something like this. You want the top 2 inches thick, 4 feet wide, 7 feet long? Do you know how heavy that's going to be? That might be almost 200 pounds. I don't know how I'm going to move that. How about we do 3/4 inch, 1 inch thick? That'll be a really secure top. You'll get the live edge. No. How about we do 3 different sections, and then we'll use something, and then I can join those on site, and you'll still get 2 inches. No. How about I just do it, and then I'll figure it out as I go. As a one-man shop, I couldn't figure out how to deal with the slab this size. If I was able to somehow transport it and get it back here, now I'd have to build something in order to slab it out, and that's going to take up so much space. It's going to be really challenging, really costly, really time consuming to do that. And I ended up finding something I think was best of all possible worlds, was 2 sequential slabs. And as I looked at those, I was able, with the offcuts, to be able to build the base. So I was able to keep color consistent across the top. Decided with the client what they would like to do in terms of matching the top. Would we want to make it a book match so that it looks symmetrical across the surface, or more as the log is naturally going to lay and continue that grain pattern across? After cutting and flattening the first slab at just over 2 feet wide and just under 2 inches thick, it was time to do the same to the second. After both slabs were flattened and brought to thickness, it was time to join them together. By staggering dominoes across the top and the bottom, I was able to get the best alignment that I could think of. For the glue up, I used Titebond Dark. Without a doubt, the live edge was the most challenging part of this glue up. It gave me a limited amount of force that I could use on each clamp, because if I used more, I would end up damaging the live edge. I saw a neat tip from Brian Benham's channel where he used CA glue and made cleats, and I did that same thing, and it helped bring everything together really tight. I use it both on top of and underneath of the slab. Making sure to turn the chisel upside down, and using a little gentle persuasion, the cleats came right off. And with the only straight edge I could find on the piece being the center line, I ended up using this as my reference point in order to cut the slab to length. With a router guide, a straight bit, followed up by a dovetail bit, I ended up creating sliding dovetail in order to stabilize the top. I cut half of the tail on 2 different boards and then planed a third board of thickness in order to join them together. Then I applied plenty of beeswax to the pin. This would allow the tails to do their job, expand and contract with the seasons, stabilize the top, and not stick to the top. In order to square up the dovetails with each other, I used a TSO guide rail square along with a Festool fence and a track saw. I cut it just shallow and fine-tuned it with a chisel. With the top stabilized, now it was time to move on to the base. I flattened each board and then brought them to thickness at the planer. The table saw and the miter saw brought me to length and width. Then it was on to making the mortise and tenon for the center supports. I heard a tip years ago that said when making tenons, you get good cuts if you use a pencil and you would get great cuts if you use a knife. I turned to the shaper origin in order to get mortise and tenons precise to the thousandth of an inch. In order to make the center mortises that would hold the two bases together, I decided now was as good a time as any to try a technique I've never seen done before. The widest diameter bit of the Festool domino that I had, I ended up setting the base just below the cut line on the tape and ended up making my way through the mortise that way. Really clean on both sides of the cut, and I was able to fine tune it with the chisel and fine tune the other one with a router and come around on the back side with a flush trim bit. Now it was a good time to do a test fit. Tenons cut, I had talked with the client and we both decided this would be a really nice touch to the piece in order to add a live edge to the center support. In order to protect the base that was touching the floor from water and wear, I decided to use G-Flex epoxy from West System. In the past, I've added their slow cure to each of the furniture pieces I've done on the parts that will touch the ground, but I like the G-Flex better because its thicker viscosity prevents it from leaking out the tape as easily, meaning there's less cleanup for me afterwards. I sanded everything to 120 and then prepared the wedge that would hold the bases together. It was time for a round over on each piece. With everything prepared, I figured now is as good a time as any to try a new technique I haven't seen done before. In order to create the expansion and contraction room for the tabletop to join to the base, I used the Domino 500, approached it from both sides of the support piece. Then I moved on to the Domino 700, larger bit for the bolt head to be able to recess. This gave the bolt just the amount of wiggle room it would need in order to expand and contract with the seasons. It's time to give all the pieces a good thorough clean, both sanding and wiping the wood dust off with citrus solvent. While it's more expensive than mineral spirits, it's a lot nicer to breathe in a small shop. The tabletop base was prepared the same way, only sanded to 120 and ready for branding. In order to maximize the depth of grain, I used a mixture of tung oil and citrus solvent. One of my favorite parts about being a custom woodworker is you have the opportunity to let each piece of wood speak for itself. And you have an opportunity as you talk with the client to be able to make design changes on the fly. One of the examples of where that happened on this project, that center stretcher, I planned for it to be nice parallel lines. Obviously, it's going to be wedge tenon. I ended up maintaining that. And yet, as I processed the offcuts, what I ended up finding was something that went so well with the theme of this tabletop. You have a live edge that's going to be shown on the center stretcher, and you're getting all of these nice rich colors. You're going from the creams into the reds. You have some purplish bluish into the browns. The thing you might compare it to is if you go to a fast food restaurant, that's going to be kind of like your production woodworking. So every fast food, you go to that fast food, everything in the same chain, you get a burger, it's going to taste the same each time. However, if you go to a steak restaurant, you're going to find this is going to be adapted to each choice cut of meat, and everything is going to be unique in this situation, and you're going to really draw out those flavors. Or one more example, you think about if you have a really small batch coffee production, they're going to draw out the unique flavors of that region, versus if you get coffee from a big roaster, they're going to burn the beans so that you have a homogeneous flavor all the way through each batch. So you lose the distinct notes of each area. And to really make this a unique, fun project, it's neat to be able to do stuff like this and draw those pieces out. And another place I was able to add in a custom touch to this was going to be the center support. So if you see in the plan that's drawn up, they would have been square with the tenon up on the top, and that looked fine. But as I looked through the offcuts, I started to set those side by side and to see what would that look like if I put that into the final piece. Client was happy with that. So after creating the tenon, able to match those in. This one, you can hardly tell, grain matches really, really well. This one, you see it coming through. A little bit of a contrast, but adds that nice style, nice live edge style. After one last test fit, it was time to assemble the base. I use West System Epoxy Slow Cure along with Trans Tint Dark Walnut Dye. I came across a recent tip that indicated it's best to take this and put it directly onto the mortise and tenon as a thin coat, then go back with a thickener such as colloidal silica, and then you'll have a stronger adhesion inside of the joint. Pre-finishing all of the pieces and having a little denatured alcohol nearby, this was one of the easiest cleanups I've ever had. Next day, it was time to pull the bases out of the clamps. After clamping the bases to the sliding dovetails, it was time to measure for the center stretcher. Bent special order bandsaw blade meant that I'd be doing much of this joint by hand with a little help from the table saw. By drilling relief holes and then cutting towards those on the inside of the tenons, I would be able to create the wedged effect, allowing the bases to be locked together by the tenons. With the bandsaw still down, I decided the best bet to make the wedges was to lock a piece into the miter gauge with a fence and support in order to make the thin wedges. And it was back on to sanding and pre-finishing before joining the center stretcher to the two bases. I think the state of California causes cancer. And without a good friend nearby, never would have been able to flip the slab, finish the other side, or load it into the truck, and it would still be in my shop. At this point, it was time to put the sander on autopilot.